Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Jones. I'm the Marketing Director of the AR for Enterprise Alliance, also well known as the Area. I'm excited to be joined today by Area member Ogi Todic of Keen Research and Jeff Bonasso of AmbiFi and MiraCheck. And without further ado, I'll pass this presentation off to Ogi to speak on some of the great work he's doing.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to present in front of this great audience. So I'll start with just a brief introduction of Jeff and myself. So my name is Ognjen. I go by Ogi Todic, and I'm the CEO of Keen Research. And Jeff is CEO of AmbiFi, as well as a person behind MiraCheck, and you'll hear more about both of these shortly. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to cover today, I'll talk a little bit about Keen Research, who we are, what we do, and specifically about our product, which is an SDK for on-device speech recognition. Then I'll kind of switch over to talking about augmented audio reality and frontline worker use cases. And then I'll pass the microphone to Jeff, and he'll talk about MiraCheck, a virtual assistant for sports pilots that he created, and then how that kind of gave him an idea to create something bigger, which is a company called AmbiFi. And I'll let Jeff explain what they do there. That will be followed by a brief discussion between Jeff and I, and then we'll give an opportunity to audience to ask questions, which you can do actually during the presentation, and just we'll answer those questions at the very end. So Keen Research we're a technology company, software company that's focused on developing and licensing software development kits for on-device speech recognition on mobile devices. Our flagship product is a KeenASR SDK. SDK stands for Software Development Kit, and it runs locally, offline, on device, on iOS, Android, Linux, and recently we also released a web version of the SDK, which runs in the browser. Our website is here. These resources will be shared later on as well. So just a kind of quick overview, the slide with a lot of logos. I think what's interesting here for this audience is the first line. We do have a lot of customers in EdTech, educational technology space. That will be the mix of second and third line. But enterprise software, and specifically kind of augmented intelligence, frontline worker support type of products, that's what the first line for the most part comes through. So EOStar, it's a warehouse management software company. MiraCheck is a little bit different, but you'll hear from Jeff. It's highly relevant to this discussion. Nomina is also another warehouse management software company. AmbiFi, you'll hear more from Jeff. And then Elm Park Labs is again a little bit different. They do VR training, which is also interesting in the context of AR and VR. So why on device? I think we're specifically focused on device. We don't do anything with cloud services for speech recognition. And so why is this relevant for you? Why is it important, or why it might be important? Well, there's several reasons. One is offline availability. So you don't need internet connectivity for your app to work, or for speech recognition in your app to work. And what's interesting here is we kind of started with, you either have it or not have it, internet connectivity. And we quickly realized that, we have people coming to us not because they don't necessarily have the internet connectivity, but they don't have reliable internet connectivity. So that's another piece here to think about. It's not just, hey, am I in a mine somewhere where there's no connectivity at all? It's more, is there reliable internet connectivity? Because if your service depends on having a reliable internet connectivity for something that, let's say, needs to work the full shift, and the connectivity is not reliable, that's going to be a problem. Right? So this is where offline helps. Privacy and security. privacy. One of the reasons for a lot of edtech companies on that previous slide is privacy, because in the U.S. There's a legal regulation around privacy for kids, not so much for adults. So again, speech data doesn't need to leave the device. And for enterprises, what's more relevant, and it's interesting that Brian kind of alluded to some of the wearables in the highly secure environment for enterprises, it's more so security, right? So do you want to have something that can listen with a potentially open mic, and the data is streamed to a third-party cloud provider, for example? So with our solution, everything happens locally on the device. Speech data does not need to leave the device. Another big piece is that there's no backend and network dependencies, and thus no scalability concerns. If it can run on the device, it runs on the device. And if you have large number of users, you don't need to worry about provisioning provisioning backend resources, whether it's yours or third party. It also works pretty much real time. There's no latency due to network round trip, sending speech data to the cloud, getting the results back. Everything happens locally. It's also easier to customize. If you think about cloud, a lot of advantages of the cloud are around, sharing those resources. So, one customer can use, if you're a third-party provider, one customer can use it, another customer can use it. But that kind of limits the possibilities for customizing things. It's not that it's not possible, but it's harder. With our solution, you're building your own product using our SDK, and you can customize the way the SDK works in many different ways. And finally, predictable pricing. With cloud solution, cost is usage-based. So it's really, it can be difficult to predict how much usage will there be, and thus what your cost will be. So there could be a mismatch between the cost side and your revenue side. So kind of in brief, with our solution, you have full control over your data and its use, and the cost is predictable and known ahead of time. So I'm going to switch now to augmented reality. Augmentation, whichever way it's done, can help in both productivity and safety when we talk about frontline workers. And one thing that we really try to kind of advocate for is the audio or speech-based augmented reality. Vision, when people think about AR, I think, I haven't done a poll on this, but I think most people think about, Terminator type interface. There's something you see with your eye, you see the reality, right? And then there's something that's projected there to augment that experience. So this type of AR gets a lot of attention. And I think there's a number of use cases where this can be very, very powerful and useful. But I think that the speech and audio kind of as an interface is a little bit neglected, but it can be powerful for a number of use cases. So when you think about this, I think there can be kind of vision-based augmented reality, and speech is obviously a useful UI modality, right? You can do things with speech instead of using controllers or gestures. But you can also think about audio or speech only augmented reality. And this is what we'll talk more about today. And the way you do this, it's really custom domain specific voice virtual assistants. That's kind of one way to think about this. So when we talk about frontline workers, here's a couple of kind of observations. They're busy, focused on task at hand, and this task usually involves hands also. So it's really a distraction if you need to use a device, and often you do, because you might be wearing gloves, may have greasy hands. So all these standard your modalities like keyboards are kind of not easy to use. And again, this is where custom domain-specific voice assistants can help solve this problem. So some examples of use cases that we're kind of seeing where we have customers. A big one that's been around for a while is voice picking. So warehouse management software and basically helping frontline workers, people who are driving around the warehouse, understand what they need to do. So back and forth communication with the device around their work. But then you'll hear a lot more from Jeff about digital workflows, checklists, procedures, and then inspections, VR training are also some interesting use cases. So when it comes to safety, what this can achieve, this being using voice as an interface, is minimize distractions. So eyes are still focused on task at hand, and you're using the device from time to time when you need it. Another piece is here that you don't need to change the environment. Let's say take off the gloves and then you start doing work without the gloves, and that's a safety risk again. So you can use the device in your kind of full operational mode, if you will. When it comes to productivity, it helps, this type of solution helps streamline access to information. It can be quick interactions. And when I talk about virtual assistant, I'd like you not to think about Siri and Amazon Alexa, which are kind of general purpose voice assistants. A lot of interesting use cases can be built fairly quickly without actually having to solve a lot of difficult problems, because you're focused on a very narrow domain. So voice picking is one example. What Jeff is doing with MiraCheck is another great example. And so back to productivity, if you're using voice, you don't need to type, obviously. So there's no, again, distractions, taking off the gloves, cleaning hands. So this can be used to navigate the app, to search for information, to input information. And so, also then less distraction results in less frustration by the frontline workers. So that also helps with productivity. When it comes to integration, we offer a no friction trial SDK, so it's really easy to tinker with. If you have developers, they can easily just download this, play with the SDK, get a sense of how well it works. It can work, get a sense of integration. We have proof of concept apps on GitHub, so again, it's something you can bring in and quickly get running with some sort of simple proof of concept. And then we also offer hands-on help during this process. And then to our customers, we offer integration support. Typically, a lot of support happens before they become customers. Well, if it happens before. With Jeff, for example, with MiraCheck, he built a proof of concept with the trial SDK and then just came to talk business. So and then we have some tools also, a tool called Dashboard. So this is a server-based tool that's used for development support. And the idea here is that during development process, you can set up your app and our SDK to create some data and metadata and to push that data to Dashboard where you can review it. So this is very powerful in a sense that it opens up the black box of what's happening on the device for developers and helps them debug problems, figure out what they set up in the wrong way, etc. And so this is a very, very powerful tool. So just a few quick slides. Who is our solution for? If you're here, there's probably some interest in speech enabling some of your products. There's a few kind of the checklist of a few things, basically. You either have or you want to develop a mobile or AR application. And the key here is actually that our solution integrates at the software level. So you need to have control over whatever application you want to voice enable of its source code, right? And your developers need to integrate our solution in that application. So if there is a third-party solution, you want to voice enable it, we would have to basically talk to whoever built that solution, not to you as a user of that application. And then when you think about, well, what can be done, there can be two approaches. You can do simpler stuff like voice enabling your mobile app. You already have an app, right? And you want to add some features that are voice driven, so you can navigate the app, search, etc. Or it can be a little bit more, a little bit deeper in that it's kind of voice first flows and design. So voice is the primary interface, and that's what you're using. So voice speaking would be one example of that, where pretty much there's stuff you can do on the screen, but conceptually, users are, if they're using the screen, then the app is really not doing its work properly. So the voice speaking would be a good example of voice first flows and design. Another quick tidbit here is that the trend that we're seeing is that enterprises are moving away from specialized kind of turnkey solutions, so hardware, software, everything, towards ruggedized Android phones and or AR headsets, and then either building or licensing their own software solutions. And obviously we're a little bit biased here because we see people who have a need for speech if they're if they want to voice enable their software solution. But generally, this is something we're seeing happening in the industry. So I'll hand the mic over to Jeff, and he will talk about MiraCheck and AmbiFi, and then he and I will chat a little bit more.
Thank you, Ogi. So my name's Jeff Bonasso, and I am founder of two companies. MiraCheck is one, AmbiFi. And I'm going to start with MiraCheck because this was a very focused use case on the vision that I had. And then AmbiFi is that next layer of that. But basically, if you think of what is the use cases for this type of technology, being a pilot in flying an airplane and doing all your procedures in a completely hands-free way. And I'm a pilot myself, so I've been in technology almost 30 years now as an architect. I'm a pilot, so going through the training process of being a pilot, came up with what MiraCheck is, and it is basically a virtual co-pilot for pilots. So if you ever fly an airplane, and this is focused more on single pilot operations. So when you fly with a co-pilot, your workload is 10x to 100x easier if you have somebody sitting next to you. But when you don't have that, that's what MiraCheck tries to do. So it's a virtual co-pilot where you can basically interact with it in a completely hands-free way. And I'm going to show you a quick demo of that later. So aviation, it does have the best safety record in the world, I would say, of almost probably any industry. And it is because of their adherence to checklists. And it's in your DNA from like day one when you go through the training of a pilot, that checklists are just part of what you're going to do. So again, MiraCheck models all that, and it gives tools to each pilot to completely create and customize their own content as well. So another thing we did here, there's 75,000 airports worldwide, and using Ogi's technology and an AI layer in between, we created a natural language voice interface to anything you'd want to ask about these airports. So when you're flying into an airport, you can say, what is the runway length at this airport? What is the elevation? What are the radio frequencies and tower frequencies? All the type of things you'd be looking at your iPad on and trying to click and find this information, to do it in a completely hands-free way. And we even went further, and you can get situational awareness. There's an autopilot which keeps you on track, and if you veer off your track, just like a co-pilot would in the right seat, they'd say, pay attention, get back on track. So it's using GPS and that sort of thing to real time give you that information, and you can control that all with your voice as well. So then AmbiFi was taking, we proved in, I would say, the cockpit is a very harsh environment, and we proved that this could be done completely hands-free to go through all this type of content. So AmbiFi is taking that for any safety critical industry and allowing you to model any human-based procedures that you would want to. And we provide a whole no-code, low-code platform, which just means you don't have to be a software engineer to model these procedures. We have a whole complete what you see, what you get UI to build these procedures, deploy these procedures throughout an organization, and we have what's called a digital black box that everybody taking these procedures, and that comes from aviation as well, there's a complete audit log of every interaction they do when they're actually running a procedure. So the voice interface is to allow you to walk through these procedures in a completely hands-free way. And we've tackled many verticals, but our big focus right now is in healthcare. And this quote comes from a recent article that the healthcare, they are trying to adopt the methodologies of aviation. And there's a great book, it was written over 10 years ago, called The Checklist Manifesto. And it is about taking that aviation methodology and applying it to other safety critical industries. And they have use cases in construction and all different use cases. But obviously healthcare is a huge one. And it says if the airline industry made as many mistakes, there would be about 460 plane crashes every day. That's just the numbers on how healthcare works with patient safety and things like that. So that is the gap we're trying to help close with a platform like AmbiFi. And I'm going to show real world use cases of what this means. So let me pull up a video here. So at first it's going to show, this is the MiraCheck side going through a checklist both on the outside of the airplane, pre-flighting, and then within the cockpit. So I'm going to play that.
At KAFJ. Are you ready to start? I am listening.
Check.
Call for fuel.
Check.
Stall horn. Test.
Check. So I'll pause it real quick. So my iPhone in this scenario is in my jacket pocket. I'm just using the voice as I'm walking around the airplane. And it also does have a complete visual UI too, and you can interact with it just tapping buttons and things like that as well. But this is showing when you're just walking around your airplane and you just want to listen to a voice walking you through these steps, and you're interacting, just checking off each item, and it moves to the next item and that sort of thing. So, and again, this procedure was built by the pilot with the content they want for their airplane. And we have a whole library of hundreds of aircraft just for this use case as well.
Fuel. Both.
Check.
Trim. Takeoff.
Check.
Takeoff section. Full throttle. 2,600 RPM max.
What is the Unicom frequency?
The Unicom frequency is 122.975 at KAFJ.
So that is the natural language interface to the airport information. So I was just asking, it already knew that I'm flying from this airport to this airport, and I did that with my voice as well. I just said I want to fly to this destination. And then I just needed the frequency at that moment, and it gave me it, and I just plug it into my cockpit source there. So now we're going to show a AmbiFi solution for healthcare. So we were invited by, they're one of the most prominent children's hospitals in the country, and they were trying to solve for years how to do sterile processing in a hands-free way. They had a big audit done, and literally there's 8 to 12, they call them omissions, but that means there's 8 to 12 mistakes when somebody sterilizes an endoscope that's going to be used in the human body, because it's like 100+ step procedure to clean an endoscope, and they have to do it all from memory. So they first train to do it all from memory, and then they go in, and even people that do it for 15 years are making mistakes because of the extensive nature of the procedure. So this is showing how to do that in a hands-free way in AmbiFi.
With the leakage tester attached, immerse endoscope in water. Observe for 30 seconds.
Open comment. Close comment.
So she is in this outfit where you absolutely are in a hands-free way. You can't be tapping phones, things like that. And you notice there's an iPad there and there's visuals there, and that helps a lot when you're first learning the process and things like that. But as you get better at it, you start doing that stuff just really listening to the voice. And you're walking through that procedure completely hands-free. In that solution, the headset she's wearing, it's a $20 Amazon trucker headset that is just the conduit to collect the voice and send it to the iPad, basically. So that is an AmbiFi use case. And again, we have those use cases in many different industry verticals as well.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great overview of both MiraCheck and AmbiFi. So we've had a chance to see two great examples of how custom domain-specific voice assistants can help sports pilots in one case, and then and frontline workers or healthcare workers in this situation in the second one. Jeff, after seeing this, I'm ready to jump on the plane with you. Although I don't know if I should use the word jump in the plane together, but so, again, I still remember when you reached out 4 years ago, and you've already kind of downloaded the trial SDK, tried it out, and it was like, hey, this works. Let's talk business. So can you tell us a little bit more about the initial integration of that trial SDK in MiraCheck? How did that go? Are there any tips you could share with our audience? And Jeff already kind of mentioned this, but I'll preface that he's a very hands-on CEO, very technical, with strong software background. He did all of this by himself initially. I'm sure there's a lot more people involved now when it comes to AmbiFi. But what do you think, Jeff?
Yep. So even 2 years prior to finding Ogi's product, we did have a voice recognition interface. We were using an open source voice recognition for the previous 2 years, and it was just not perfect at all. Like, there was lots of issues. If there was any cockpit noise, it would make it much more difficult for it to work reliably and things like that. So yes, when I found Ogi's product, it was in a matter of a few days of just taking what we already had with what we integrated with this old product and using his product in our solution. And again, the accuracy and I'll call it the latency of everything, it just went up significantly. And that's why I called and said, let's do business, basically, because it was just an easy, great experience to develop with it. With a voice API, there's not many functions that you have to integrate. You really are just saying when you want to listen, and when you're listening, it's usually giving you a stream of text that's being converted from the voice. And then you as a developer take that text and you can do lots of things with it. So that's what I was mentioning with the little AI layer we have in there for the airport information. We did something which in the AI world is called named entity recognition, and that's training a system on the 75,000 airports and all the metadata out there. And once you train it on that, when you talk to the speech engine, you can just send the text to that, and it knows if you said the name of an airport in a sentence, for example, it knows that that is an airport, and all the metadata about that airport it can give you in real time. And that's how we implemented that portion of it for MiraCheck. And we've done the same thing in healthcare for asking questions about patient information from an EHR system. And it's just training it on a different domain, a different set of metadata, and you can get the same results pretty much in any domain. So that is a bit about the integration of the product.
And I mentioned before this backend tool we have, and I think I think for both apps you've used it extensively during development. Any thoughts on kind of the value, or how did it help?
Yep.
The dashboard.
So what it does is, as Ogi said, all the voice recognition is happening right on the device. And when you're trying to debug, especially in the QA phase of rolling out a product and things like that, it's hard to know when you have a group of people all using your app, they're using their voice, and how reliable it is. So what the dashboard does is it sends all that local audio data up to the cloud, and you can review and see the quality of the recognition per user. So you can listen to the little snippets when they were trying to walk through a procedure or something in our case, and you can see, oh, it didn't recognize that word, and you can figure out why it didn't recognize that word. Maybe there was a ton of background noise, and you hear that background noise in there as well, because you get the audio stream and then you get the text it tried to convert it to, and it just helps the whole debugging process and QA process as you develop things.
Yeah, so the way we see this tool, again, I think I mentioned this already, it's like the idea is that we want to open up the black box of what's happening on the device during, let's say, beta testing, during any kind of testing. And this has kind of proved to be very, very useful for our customers. One thing that I also want to bring up that kind of came up is the background noise, and then potentially also this question comes often is accents. How well does your solution work for non-native speakers and a lot of background noise? The way we train these models that are used by our solution, which all of this we do in-house, they're very robust to background noise. So obviously in this situation, having a headset helps tremendously, and you kind of, for hands-free type of setting, and we'll talk a little bit more probably about that, you do need a headset, right? If you want to have always-on listening in hands-free mode. And then in terms of accents, a lot of these use cases are focused on a fairly narrow domain. So you're not trying to distinguish between 100,000 different words. It might be 50, it might be 500. And so this tremendously helps also to preserve accuracy levels even for accented speech. So Jeff, another question, you mentioned intent recognition, NLU, that you kind of built on top of it. Some of this stuff comes on like for free on Android, for example, like native speech recognition and intent recognition. So what's your take on kind of, hey, there's something that's free that you can potentially use? I'm sure you tried that, and what was your experience with those types of solutions?
Well, anything like that Apple and Google's doing and stuff like that, they're typically very cloud-based. And again, if you look at all our use cases, you can't have the cloud in a cockpit, or even the hospital situation, there's just always some network hiccups, network issues. So we 100% had the requirements of being 100% on the device. And in the healthcare case, it's even the HIPAA rules and things like that. It's almost a requirement that that data stays on the device. So we've looked at every voice solution, and this is the one that we found that is by far the most reliable and works in our use cases and our environments. And so that's why we went with it.
So I believe that concludes our presentation. Thank you again to Jeff and Ogi for your time and for this great presentation. And thank you to the audience. I'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Thank you.